You ever return to a story that you love, one you grew up in really, and find that all the locks have been changed? Now, the shape of it is still the same, the name is still on the gate, but the soul of it is gone, replaced with something hollow and manufactured, something cheap. It reminds me of an old shipwright's riddle. The tale of the ship of Theseus. As it goes, the ship was maintained, it was preserved by a grateful city, and as the years wore on and the boards began to rot, one by one they replaced all of the boards in the ship with new and perfect timber, until not a single original board remained. So here's the riddle. After every single piece has been replaced, is it still the same ship? But tonight I'm not just here for a philosophical debate, my friends. This same principle applies to storytelling. Because that slow, methodical replacement, that hollowing out of a legend, has become a defining plague of storytelling in the 21st century. The great storytelling houses of our time are no longer in the business of building new vessels. It's too risky. It's too much work. So instead, they've become professional shipbreakers, perpetually restoring the legendary ships of our times, the Starship Enterprises, the Millennium Falcons, the Hogwarts Expresses. But do not be fooled. These are not restorations. They are hostile takeovers. A new crew of writers comes on board not with the reverence of the student, but with the arrogance of a conqueror. They don't study the blueprints, they don't care what currents the ship was made for. They see a mighty sea-worn galleon, and rather than admiring the design, they think that this would be an excellent yacht to house their ego. They aren't honoring the story, they are using a famous name to build a monument to themselves. So how do you gut a legend? Well, let's look at some examples. We'll examine two attempts to rebuild the Tolkien ship. One, an ambitious but flawed vessel, and the other, a hollowed-out forgery. First, the forgery. Amazon's Rings of Power. Now, on the surface, it looks the part. They sprinkle in names from the appendices like they're seasoning a stew. Durin, Isildur, Elendil. But this is the most insidious form of disrespect. It is pandering, and not pandering with quality, but using the language of the law to tell a story that is alien to its soul. Take the plank of the character. They gave us Galadriel. In Tolkien's legend, she is ancient, she is serene, she is ethereal, she is a queen already tested by time who would go on to resist the temptation of the ring and prove herself worthy again of the undying lands of Valinor. The writers ripped out that ancient plank of tempered oak and they replaced it with a cheap piece of driftwood. They turned her into a hot-headed, short-sighted, revenge-driven warrior. They didn't adapt a character. They replaced her with a generic modern archetype that has nothing to do with the source. And in doing so, they replaced the plank of theme. Tolkien's elves are defined by a profound sadness, a long, slow fading from this world. They are a beautiful tragedy. And the show replaces this with petty political squabbling. They rip out a mythic sorrow and replace it with a soap opera. Now, not all shipwrights are malicious. Some are masters. Look at Peter Jackson's original Lord of the Rings films. By any measure, these films are a masterpiece of restoration. But even the most skilled of restorers or sometimes miss a nail, and therefore leave a hole that was not there before. Let's talk about the eagles. In Tolkien's book, the eagles are not some taxi service. They are a proud and ancient race of sentient beings with their own king, their own lands, and their own immense sense of pride. And they aren't servants of Gandalf, they're not at his beck and call, they are his allies. And they help him out of friendship and mutual hatred of a common enemy. They would not consent to being beasts of burden for a mere hobbit, nor would they dare fly the One Ring, the ultimate embodiment of corrupting power, into the heart of Sauron's domain where the skies are continually monitored by his watchful eye and patrolled with Nazgul. Their king himself in the books says he would not risk it. Now, Jackson kept the cool factor of the eagles, but he carved out their soul. He removed their agency, their intricacies, their personhood. They replaced a living, breathing part of this world with a convenient plot device. And in doing so, they left a gigantic glaring hole in the hull of an otherwise magnificent ship. So why did they do it? Why did they replace the good timber with cheap pine and driftwood? Well, there are three simple reasons. The first and most prominent of which is arrogance. The quiet belief that they are smarter and more enlightened than the original builder. That they are here to fix the problems with their superior modern sensibilities. The second is fear. It's much safer for one's career to just repaint his famous ship rather than building one on your own and having to risk the budget to see if it'll actually float. These are not artists, these are house flippers. And the third, and most insidious, is agenda. The ship is no longer a vessel for a journey, no. It is a convenient floating billboard. They use a famous silhouette to broadcast their message, contouring the plot and the characters to serve a modern agenda rather than a timeless truth. And the story, well, the story just becomes a hostage. So what happens when a new crew has nothing but contempt for the original blueprints? Sometimes, if the old gods are smiling, you'll get a fighter, a hero, a true believer on the inside, and for that, we look to the chaotic and strange and briefly beautiful voyage of the first season of The Witcher. Here was a ship whose crew, by their own admission, openly mocked and despised the source material. They were shipbreakers wearing a captain's coat. But they encountered a problem. You see, their lead actor, Henry Cavill, he was not just playing a part. He was acting as a guardian of the original tale. He was like the ghost of the original shipwright, haunting the set, fighting tooth and nail in every scene to keep the original planks of the story. And for a brief time, against all odds, it worked. It sailed. It was a strange and beautiful and chaotic vessel, but it sailed true because the heart of it, the character of Geralt of Rivia, was being fiercely protected by a man who loved the character, who loved the story, more than he loved his own paycheck. It is the ultimate proof that a restoration can work, but sometimes it requires a mutiny of one, a guardian, scarred by the battle, but holding the line. And what happens when the guardian finally leaves the ship, weary from the fight? Well, the rats usually take over, the whole thing goes to hell, and it usually drifts towards the rocks. And so we return to the riddle. After every plank is replaced, is it still the ship of Theseus? Well, for our stories, the answer is simpler and sadder than the original. When the planks are replaced with cheap materials, for cynical reasons, by builders who resent the original design, the answer is no. And the final betrayal is this: the rebuilt vessel is no longer seaworthy. It can no longer take you on a journey. It cannot withstand a storm. It is just a hollowed out replica, permanently docked, with the name Theseus painted in glowing letters on the bow. It looks like the legendary ship at a distance, but as soon as you get close, you see the cheap materials, the poor work. The nails are all crooked and the sails are just painted canvas. It's not a ship anymore, it's a tourist trap. It's a corpse being paraded around for the masses to look at while they charge admission at the gate. So here's to the stories that are told right, and the tellers that are willing to tell them. Which modern remake broke your heart, my friends? I would love to share your passion for the tale. And until the next time we gather here in the tavern, stay bloodthirsty, traveler. We'll see you next time. Stange forth.